anytime you have 15 judges in the same room, I think it's a unique opportunity. And I wasn't nervous with that, I don't think I did anything wrong, but when Sheriff Jackson was here, it kind of got me nervous. And actually, that doesn't make me nervous. What makes me nervous are these great kids behind me. I was part of the very first debate on the stage with these kids asking questions. Good luck tonight. I like to call it God's country. So welcome everyone. I'll be brief and let's hear what you guys have to say. So back to you.
And now it is my honor to introduce another one of our biggest supporters, a Johns Creek resident who we are so grateful to have here tonight, the state of Georgia's first female treasurer, Lynn Riley.
Good evening. Welcome everyone. Glad to have you here in Johns Creek. Very, very happy to have our learned jurists here with us tonight. We live in a county of over 1 million people, and we don't often realize how important the courts are in our lives, and to have good judges that make sure that the law is followed and upheld on behalf of all of us is very, very critical. So we really are very, very honored and blessed to have this group of folks here with us tonight to give us insights through the questions that the children are going to be asking of what it is they do for us, because there are so many functions that we don't really think of.
And I've been a judge for 7 months. I was appointed in June. I sent it for election on May 19th to hold my seat, and I live around the corner in Thornhill.
Thank you. I'm Rachelle Carnesale, and I'm out of alphabetical order. So just to let you know that, I've been on the bench since January 2019. So I am quite new, though not as new as my dear friend Judge Carnesale. And I also will be on the ballot to hold my seat on May of 2020.
Thank you all for having me. I am Judge Dunaway. I've been on the bench for 3 years and 2 months. I was elected in 2016, took office in January of 2017. Again, thank you all for having us.
Good evening, I'm Belinda Edwards. I, like my colleague Judge Dunaway, was elected in 2016 and began serving in January 2017. I am also standing for election on May 19, 2020. So please remember, Belinda Edwards, vote for me. Good evening, I'm Ellerbe, and I have been on the bench of Fulton County Superior Court since January 2011. I'm not up for re-election this year. You can vote for me if you want, but it might be a write-in. But I've been serving, so maybe that's not a good idea, but I've been serving for a little over 9 years now, and thanks for having us.
Good evening, my name is Kevin Farmer. I've been on the bench for 13 months and change. I still recognize some of you from the 2018 election cycle, where I was elected. I am also not up for election. I just thought I'd come and answer any of y'all's questions, and I hail from Sandy Springs, so I'm forward to speak with y'all.
Good evening, Shawn LaGrua. I've been on the bench for almost 10 years. We'll be going into my 3rd election this year. I want to thank Nims and Sankranti and his wife and everybody here in Bergenal for that incredibly wonderful food and hospitality. Thanks for having us.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Paige Whitaker. I've been on the bench for 3 years, also not on the ballot. Just wanted to come up north of Buckhead and say hello and get a chance to talk to all of y'all. Thank y'all for putting this forum together.
Hi everyone, I am Emily Richardson, and I've been on the bench for almost 14 months. Judge Krause and I were appointed on the same day, although
question was, what would surprise the public most about judges? I think that that's a varied answer because we are all very distinct individuals who do lots of different things, but I think one of the things that people think about judges is that we're solitary. We like to be by ourselves and we're always very serious. That is not who I am. It is absolutely who I am day to day on the bench. But I think one of the things that probably would surprise people is that most of us are engaging. We like to be with and around people. Most of us like people. Most of us. And so I think that people think judges don't like to be around folks and don't like to get out of the community and don't have a lot of personality. But I think you'll find in this group, we get a little bit of everything.
So the next question is for Judge Brasher. What is the Fulton County Family Court and what purpose does it serve?
Sure, thank you very much for asking about the family court. I spent the last 3 years before I took on the role as chief judge of being on the family division. The family division is unique in the state of Georgia in that we've devoted 4 full-time judges to handling all of the family matters that come before our court. Why did we do that? First of all, because folks who come to the court for family law issues have nowhere else to turn. They have to come to the court because it's required that those matters be adjudicated by the Superior Court. So we need to dedicate resources so that people who have to come to the court have resources available to them to have those issues addressed. Second is because, frankly, the issues with family court almost always involve children. It's incumbent upon us as judges to take those responsibilities seriously, and so therefore we've dedicated these 4 judges and staff to the issue of the family division. We handle thousands of cases a year. We handle some of the most serious issues that face folks as far as changes to family dynamics, changes to custody for children. Why have we done it that way? Again, it's because those issues must be addressed, and we've decided to devote those resources. One of the things that I found.
That's a great question. My background is in child abuse prosecution, and so a lot of the factors I consider are the same ones I considered as a prosecutor in determining what the appropriate recommendation would be for an offender. I think one of the things that surprised me the most in Fulton County is how many incredibly youthful offenders come before me, 17, 18, 19, 20, who are charged with offenses which will cause them likely to spend the rest of their lives in prison. And so as I look at those individuals, and as a group today, I'm very interested in what brought them to this point in their lives. Today I sent a sentence to a very young man. I don't understand why you traded your life for cell phones. And so I'm very interested in the background of the people coming to me. Another fact about me is that I'm a special needs parent. And I'm also shocked on a daily basis how many individuals have learning disabilities or other cognitive issues. And I think it's really important to look into that and try to tailor sentences around that as well. So cognitive abilities, how people have been raised, what supports they had in their families. We also see a shocking number of kids who grew up in the foster care system who were later charged with crimes as well. So I'm very interested in that. Thank you for the question.
All right. We're going to skip over Krause. We're going to go right back to you. Sorry. We'll go right back to you. For Judge Dunaway, as you preside over cases involving criminal defendants, do you ever consider the race of the person charged? If so, why is it appropriate and how does it impact your work?
For 8 years, prepared me the most to be a Superior Court judge. Because currently I'm in the family division. So as a family division judge, I'm dealing similarly with some of the same issues I dealt with when I was on the juvenile court bench for 8 years. So I feel like I was adequately prepared to handle, as Judge Brasher said, the problems that the families bring to you. They look to you to help make a difference and to basically consider yourself a problem solver. Because that's what you do. You solve problems, you try to create a difference, you try to get them out of the courthouse and into a better situation than they were when they came into the courthouse.
Judge Ellerbe, what are the accountability and business courts in the Fulton Superior Court and what purpose do they serve?
I
think I fed you that question. That's so on point for me. The accountability courts are a group of 4 different courts on the Fulton County Superior Court. The drug court and the veterans court and our behavioral health court. They are referred to collectively as accountability courts because we hold these clients and these programs accountable. Typically, they are sent to these accountability courts by virtue of a guilty plea to a low-level felony, where they have, if it's a drug court sentence, a substance abuse problem. If it's a veteran court sentence, it's a substance abuse problem for a person who is a current or former veteran, or is a veteran. And then for the mental health court, it's a dual diagnosis court for people who are dealing with mental health diagnoses and substance abuse problems, where they come before a superior court judge who serves on our accountability court on a regular basis every 2 weeks initially. Then it degrades to once a month for about 18 months, where they are held accountable, where they are drug tested, they are going through group therapy, they are assigned professionals such as clinicians to deal with mental health issues, to deal with criminal thinking issues, to deal with substance abuse issues. They're assigned case managers. So they are coming before judges and either being congratulated and encouraged as they're doing well, or being sanctioned for a violation, be it a positive drug screen or not showing up for group or what have you. And we find that this really helps to break that cycle of people rotating in and out of jail for low-level felonies. Thefts, a lot of times, possession of cocaine. Those are all felony charges, and we see them, sometimes people come before a judge with 15 convictions. And accountability courts help break the underlying problem, which is the addiction. For a business court, I am the presiding judge of the Metro Atlanta Business Case Division, which was created by the Fulton County Superior Court bench and services the Metro Atlanta area for participating courts. Gwinnett participates, our Fulton State Court, our Fulton Superior Court, and we handle the very complex business type cases, either shareholder disputes or trust agreement disputes. There's all kinds of variety of cases that we see that are very complex. Many times you may have upwards of 20 or more parties in these cases that last for years. I just presided over a trial in the business case division in November that had been pending for 10 years. So it is an avenue for efficient expertise in handling those complex business cases. All of us up here have quite a volume of cases, and most of us carry quite a number of serious felony cases that have constitutional issues regarding timeliness of appearances before judges, for hearings, and for trials. And by necessity, those type of cases have to take precedence sometimes over civil cases. So we found that the business court really targets those very complex civil cases that otherwise might not get the priority, and we can allot different resources to them to get them addressed in a more efficient way. Thank you for the question.
Judge Farmer, as a judge who was elected, how long did it take, and what did you need to do to succeed?
I've made over 15,000 phone calls, literally. Really, I found out quite by accident that Judge Campbell was retiring. I was working as a district attorney down in Clayton County, and I had a case with some individuals who also had a case in Fulton County, so I called the Fulton County prosecutor. He said, "We're going to try and get that trial before Judge Campbell retires." And I went, So I jumped in the race in January of 2018. Most of these folks up here haven't run for it. It's an undertaking. You're talking about, you have to, during the day, you make phone calls for money, and at night, you make phone calls for votes. And that's what I did for it. My mom made 1 million phone calls. Quite seriously, you heard from Mrs. Farmer. I got votes for that, trust me. When your mom calls, people listen. It's something that I spent, I graduated law school with Judge Dunaway, both graduated from Mercer in '96. I started my career as a public defender, so I did some defense work and some civil work and then some DA work. I knew I wanted to be a judge one day, and I just tried to position myself across the different areas of law because I appeared in front of judges statewide, and I knew I wanted to be the kind of judge who had a handle on a little bit of everything, because you get a little bit of everything as a judge. You get criminal cases, you get civil.
Krause. Who do you ask for advice?
Sorry. So if you didn't hear the question, it's who do you ask for help and are you allowed to collaborate as judges? I'll start with the second question, which is absolutely you're allowed to collaborate.
Judge LaGrua. What have you accomplished as a judge that you are the most proud of?
I think that's kind of an easy answer for me. We have in my courtroom an accountability court. It's not an official one. It's drug court, mental health court, and veterans court. But I identified as I was a career prosecutor like Judge Adams, Judge Dunaway. I'm not a career prosecutor. A long time as a prosecutor. And I realized that our defendants' age of violent offenders was getting younger. The educational level was dropping. And I guess I explain it this way. If Lynn Riley walks out here tonight and gets robbed at gunpoint, that's a 10-year minimum mandatory sentence, and I'm not going to argue that's not appropriate. The question becomes when we catch that young man or woman, and they're 17 years old, what do we do in 10 years? Because they're going to get out, there's probably going to be another victim, so is there something we can do? Having done accountability courts in DeKalb and working with ones in Fulton, I thought we'd try the same model with younger, more serious offenders. That is coming to court every month, being enrolled in school, having to keep a grade point average, get drug tested, have curfews, do resumes, job logs, get skills that they can use in the job community. And we're finding that it's working. It is making a difference. Prison is a huge motivator. Most people say when somebody gets to be 16, 17, 18, there's not a lot you can change, but a long prison sentence is a huge deterrent. And so we've seen it starting to work. We also have 4 police officers assigned from the Atlanta Police Department to mentor and counsel and check on these young folks. So it's self-named by the participants, My Journey Matters, and that's probably my proudest accomplishment since I've done that.
Now for Judge Richardson. What is the biggest challenge facing our court system in Fulton County?
Biggest challenge facing our court system. My first thought goes to funding, which is never the good answer because who wants our taxes raised? But the Fulton County court system is very overwhelmed. We're a very large county and there are a lot of crimes, and the number of cases the judges are facing, and the amount of staff that we have from our sheriff's office and things of that nature, they're overwhelmed, so that plays into it. I agree that, not to kind of repeat some of the other answers, but some of the other issues facing the Fulton County court system is the youth of our offenders, our gangs. The gang situation in Fulton County is extremely bad, and they are bringing in younger and younger participants in these gangs and getting these juveniles to commit the crimes for them, hoping that the juveniles will get a lighter sentence. But so that is creating this ongoing repetitive crime. And we're seeing a lot of recidivism and things of that nature. And there are phenomenal programs like Judge LaGrua is doing trying to stop that. But it is the culture of Fulton County right now that this pressure of the gangs on our youth is leading to increased crime. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest burdens.
We're going to go to Judge Whitaker. So we have a two-part question for you. Who appointed you to the bench, and how long did it take, and what did you do to succeed?
I was appointed to the bench by Governor Deal, who was our governor before Governor Kemp. How long did it take? Well, I applied originally for a position on one of our appellate courts, and the process of the applications and everything really doesn't take that long. It's maybe a couple of month process. And you interview with a commission that is appointed by the governor of about 20 attorneys and judges. And then if you make it through that, you interview with the governor. You and usually 4 or 5 or 6 other people, and then a decision is made. I did not get the position that I was seeking at the time, but I was encouraged by the governor's office to put in for other positions. There happened to be another position on the Fulton County bench at the time, so I put in for that, and I got that. That process took probably from the time I was interviewed to the time I was appointed 4 or 5 months. And can you remind me again of the second part of the question? What did I do to succeed? What did I do to succeed? I guess I had good answers to the questions. I don't know if this is one right now. But, you know, I think that the governor, any governor is looking for a lot of different things when they're appointing a judge, but they're probably looking for somebody who has relevant experience, and I am one of the career prosecutors up there. There are a lot of us. A lot of what Fulton County especially does is criminal cases, unfortunately. Hopefully they want people who are smart, which I think all of us up here fit that bill. They probably want people with common sense, who are somewhat personable, who are not pushovers, and I probably fit the bill for all of that as well. And the rest of it you would have to ask them.
Our last question is for Judge Millender. What is the most important characteristic for a judge to have?
Well, I think it's so hard to pick one. But I think that if I had to choose one, I would choose temperament. And I choose temperament because, yes, judges have to be smart, and we need, as Judge Wilson said, relevant experience. And almost all the lawyers who are going to apply do have those things. I think the judges who are most successful have a wonderful temperament, and that is how they treat people that appear before them. Before I became a Superior Court judge, I was a Magistrate Court judge. In the Magistrate Court, I dealt with people who represented themselves a lot. And so I would have people, the general public, that would come in and they'd be faced with civil suits, sometimes somewhat criminal matters, and there were small claims, and they usually represent themselves because they thought it wasn't a big deal, or perhaps they couldn't afford a lawyer. And the feedback that I got most from people, whether they won or they lost, is that they came in and they felt like they had their day in court, that someone listened to their position and treated them with dignity and respect. And so I think that for a judge to be successful and re-electable is that they have a good temperament and they treat everyone with dignity and respect when they come to the courtroom.
All right, so that's all the pre-written questions we have. But we are opening the floor up to all of you. So whether you have a specific question for a specific judge or a general question that one of the judges, if you'd like to take upon yourself to answer, just please speak up because we don't have another microphone. So I see a hand over there. Yes, you.
I'm Margaret Remedy, resident of
Reinventing and causing a quality of life issue for a law-abiding citizen. In that way, I think we've done a good job and we can do more of that.
I think we don't have resources. I was talking about youthful offenders. I have a choice. I have an armed robbery or robbery defendant. It's either back to the neighborhood they came from or prison. We don't have a lot of alternatives. We have a detention center. It can be successful, but we don't have housing. We don't have other programs. We don't have military boot. We just don't have other things for us to do besides put these people back where they came from. So I think that's one of the big things.
Right, that's right. And I'll just add to that, I agree with both of my colleagues, but there are two areas that I'd like to see. One of them ties into what in some ways, Judge LaGrua shared. The first is discretion. To the extent that there is a way for judges to have more discretion in the types of sentences we impose. I think that's something that's sorely needed because there are any manner of crimes, but in those cases where there are mandatory sentences that have to be imposed, like Judge LaGrua talked about, armed robberies. You might be surprised to know that you can be charged with armed robbery if it's not an actual gun. You can be charged with armed robbery if it's a replica of a gun. And we, in situations where there is no discretion, have no choice but to impose the mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years. That ties into my second priority, and I think that we need to continue to work on juvenile justice reform. That is significant because we oftentimes want to deal with juvenile offenders, youthful offenders, in the same way that we do adults. I often share with citizens with whom I speak that in dealing with juveniles, we've got to be clear about those young people that we are angry with and those young people that we are afraid of. And you deal with those two categories of youthful offenders differently. And so we're able to fashion sentences that allow us to hold young people accountable for making poor choices, but give them some sense of hope so that if they make better choices, they will still have an opportunity to have a life before them. And I think it does a couple of things. I think it in some ways addresses the recidivism rate, because if we can get to them earlier, there's a possibility, if they're addressed in juvenile court, that we won't see them in superior court being charged with gang activity and armed robbery and the types of offenses that we're all afraid of. I'm not talking about folks who stick guns in people's faces, but there are a lot of different offenses that we see, even in superior court, that could be addressed with some of these young people because they have juvenile records. And we simply right now don't have the resources, but we also, I don't believe, have discretion in some of those areas to impose and fashion the kinds of sentences that we think appropriately addresses the conduct.
Thank you. So from my perspective, because I spent 8 years on the juvenile court bench, two of the main areas that we need to address is raising the mandatory attendance age for school, because right now, young people can drop out of high school at the age of 16, and they can also be pushed out by the school system, which means if they're not in school, they are loitering. They're already creating a problem for themselves. So that's one of the things that we can do. Secondly, what we can do is raise the mandatory age for when we consider a young person eligible for a felony. In Georgia, and we're one of 3 states that still treat 17-year-olds as an adult. So if you're charged with an offense as a 17-year-old, you're kicked into the adult system. Juvenile court is a court of rehabilitation. It's not one where superior court is crime and punishment. So you can fashion outcomes. I think if we can focus on changing, I think they dropped the law, and hopefully we pass, to raise the mandatory age for treating a young person as a juvenile from 17 to 18, so you will not have those young people who have committed those offenses going into the adult system, but giving them an opportunity to be in the juvenile court system where they can have an opportunity for services, get their lives turned around, and we can stop having them drop out of school at 16 or be pushed out by the school system. That would help tremendously.
All right, we have a question back there.
Yes, you talked about the mandatory sentences. And I'm wondering, personally, is there a particular law with a mandatory sentence that if you could change it so that it's more discretionary, what particular sentence or crime would you seek to address that would give you more leniency?
I think we've all seen a 15-year-old charged as an adult or a 14-year-old charged as an adult for stealing an iPhone. And that's 10 years to the door. That kid comes out at 25. That's if you give him the least you can give. So I don't pretend to speak for these other folks. But from my perspective, there has been some change in that law. The prosecution and the defense have to agree to lower it, but the judge doesn't have the discretion to do it. It places the discretion of prosecutors. So Short answer, I think armed robbery. And I just want to follow up on the election question. All these folks up here, this is a nonpartisan position. I went to a lot of Republican breakfasts and a lot of Democratic dinners. You got to reach all the voters of Fulton County, not just 48%. So that's what that's the task these folks have in front of them. So.
I will add to what my classmate and now colleague said. It's always been amazing to me, even when I was a prosecutor, that you can walk up to me, put a gun in my face, and say, give me your wallet. And if I hand it over to you, you get 10 years in prison. If I don't, and you shoot me, you can get probation. So, oh my goodness, I would rather give you my wallet than you shoot me. So that's always been very uneven to me. Speaking of common sense, it didn't make common sense that you shoot someone and you're eligible, the judge has discretion to give you 1 to 20 years of probation. But if you actually take their wallet, it's a mandatory 10 years in prison, day for day. So that's just kind of piggybacking on what Kevin said, with the armed robbery being one of those things to give us a little bit more discretion to fashion a sentence. That hopefully you all elected us to make the decision that needs to be made.
I'll just echo it with a different example. I would say armed robbery as well. I've had a case where it wasn't a gun, it was a small pocket knife. And the state would not come off of the armed robbery charge. The judge has no discretion at all, does not decide what to go forward to trial on, what charges to go forward to trial on. That's the prosecutor's decision. And if there's a conviction and it was a waving of a knife and a turning over of an empty wallet in this case, then it's mandatory minimum of 10 years.
And I think in the same regard, with respect, this was an easy one on robbery, so I'll address that too. I think something the public doesn't think about is that in the same way that we're all different, how we assess cases possibly, and apply our experience and common sense to them, prosecutors also have great discretion. And it depends on what prosecutor you have, what decisions they might make about youthful offenders. And that is part of what is so frustrating. I have a counterexample of a prosecutor today who did not drop the armed robbery to something lower, but removed what's referred to as recidivist sentencing, so that the young man would be required to have a 30-year sentence and serve every day of it. But we deal every day with different types of prosecutors. Some think everyone's a predator. Others see things more in the way that I do as a judge, which is that there's bad deciders and there's people that need to be removed from society. And it's our job to try to determine whether someone's made bad decisions and is not a danger to society in general. We give them some support, or if they're a general threat, need to be removed for as long as possible. And so that's something we contend with every day, is the judgment that the prosecutors are allowed to use.
My colleagues have said, but also add one other example, and that is something that's been a success. And most folks up here have dealt with it in the post-era, but I dealt with it as a prosecutor before, and that's what we call the Romeo and Juliet circumstances. So it used to be that there was no discretion for some of the statutory rape offenses or things like that that occur between young people that are very close in age, one of whom is over the age of majority and the other is not. And there's been some changes based on the fact that people realized that these sentences were out of kilter with what ought to be happening in those circumstances. Kids had made choices to be together, etc. So that's a success story as far as reinvesting the discretion that my colleagues have talked about back to the court to assess circumstances as they exist and not one size fits all. So I'll just use that as a positive example.
Good evening. Thank you for your attendance this evening. As we start to look at lowering recidivism rate, what can we as residents of Fulton County expect in the lines of innovation to continue to lower those recidivism rates?
Got the mic, so I'll start just real briefly and then pass it on to my colleagues. Two primary factors that really drive recidivism. One is mental health and the other is drug abuse. So those issues are things that our society has found intractable for generations now. None of us want to go back to the days where people who suffered from mental health disorders or diseases were warehoused. Well, unfortunately, many of them are today, and they're in the jails and prisons in our state and country. So we've got that issue. But when they get out, they decompensate, they don't take medications. When folks who have addictions aren't treated, they medicate themselves with street drugs. So those two issues, when we deal with those, we begin to deal with recidivism rates. And also, to Judge Adams' point, and that is trying to intervene at an earlier age, recognizing that we have a collective responsibility to these children. We're going to educate them and teach them what's right and wrong, or we're going to have to pay to have them in prison. So those are the things that I expect. As far as innovation is concerned, we're working with the sheriff's office for pretrial interventions on mental health cases. We're working with the district attorney's office and with other partners around the state on treatment courts. And those are the innovations I think you can continue to expect. Sorry, Judge.
And I'm add to Judge Brasher, I absolutely agree in terms of substance abuse. But I think two other factors that significantly impact recidivism are education and employment. And so you will find for most of us that many of the defendants who come before us to be sentenced have not graduated from high school. And I can't assign a percentage to that, but a significant number of them have not. And so when you have a person who comes into the criminal justice system with no education, you're already dealing with someone who doesn't have the same kind of thing that a person who has some prospect of employment has. The second